Hi all. In today's video, we're going to start to look at the second half of the rural geography topic, which is looking at rural land use conflicts and the management of those conflicts. Now, a very brief bit of background today. I'm not really going to talk about this too much. The area that we're going to be looking at is the Lake District. It's the UK's second largest national park by land area. It's got about 40,000 residents who live there permanently, but noteworthy, it welcomes over 15 million visitors every single year. So we're looking at an area where you have got a reasonably large number of people who live there, but a very large number of people who visit it on a yearly basis. So there's going to be a variety of different land uses that occur in the park, and those land uses are going to come into conflict. Now, what types of conflicts are we going to be looking at? Now, these are the main six that we're going to be examining. We'll be looking at tourists and cars, footpath erosion, tourists and farming, recreation that occurs on Lake Windermere, forestry, and then back to tourists and how they interact with locals. And so we'll go through each of these in turn, and then we'll start to look at how some of the issues we identify are managed. So, right, a lot of stats are going to be coming up in this, guys. It is a very, this is one of your case studies, and it is a very kind of statistical based one. So it is obviously something that you will need to spend a little bit of time working on, and a little bit of time getting your head round the different statistics that we're throwing in here. And as I say, you wouldn't be expected to have all of these committed to memory, but certainly some of them. So yeah, first, 90% of all the visitors that come to the Lake District travel by car. Most of the roads in the Lake District are not dissimilar to the roads here on Arran. They're very narrow. Now this means you've got an increased risk of accident for all road users, but particularly vulnerable road users like walkers, cyclists, horse riders, etc. The stuff we've got listed on the screen. Now there's high levels of pollution as well, are also created from literally the emissions of these cars, but we've also got noise pollution, which is something that's often forgotten about. Now, one of the big appeals that the Lake District has, one of the reasons people go there, is for peace and tranquility. And if you've got a huge number of cars and other vehicles driving through the area, that peace and tranquility is reduced. Obviously, these problems get worse at peak times. Over the summer holidays, they obviously are a lot more intense in terms of the volume of traffic, and it gets a bit easier over the winter. And one of the big impacts of this is how it impacts on locals. If you live in this area and you're trying to get to work, the impact of a huge increase in car volume is quite pronounced. You've obviously then got a lack of parking throughout the national park, and particularly in areas that are referred to as honeypot sites. Now, as a reminder, a honeypot site is a particular area. So, for example, in the Lake District, we'd be talking about a place called Ambleside. And that area is designed to have lots of visitors go to that area. Infrastructure is put in there to draw visitors to a central hub point. And the reason we do that is to make sure that that area is supported and it can deal with those visitors, but it takes the strain off some of the other areas that would otherwise be put under a lot of strain. So yeah, and then the other bits, yes, tourists kind of just stop at the side of the road, they park wherever they can, and that can cause problems, particularly if they're parking on verges and at the side of the road, where you're going to see erosion of the soil and of the land in these areas. And also tourists get upset because they get caught behind slow-moving tractors and things like that as well. Now, footpath erosion, nice and straightforward this. The more people you have walking on a path, you will erode that path. So, for example, in the path up to Helvellyn, it's very detrimental the number of tourists that travel over the same route. So the paths get severely eroded down, and they form very deep ditches as they're eroded, and this then means if you've got large amounts of rainfall, which is very common in the Lake District, you get little rivers and burns that form on the paths, and that further erodes them. You then also get, once the paths get eroded, people then walk round to the side of it, widening out the impact that they're having. With farming, a very straightforward one. Tourists drop litter. They drop huge amount of litter, and that can have a big impact because one, sheep, livestock eat it, and it can cause them severe health problems, and they're obviously an investment for every farmer. And also, it looks untidy. It doesn't look nice. It causes visual pollution. Now, visual pollution is something that might sound like it's a bit kind of woolly and airy-fairy, but it is a real thing. It has an impact on the area. If the area doesn't look nice, then one, it's not pleasant for the people who actually live there, and two, it's not pleasant for drawing in more visitors and the income that they bring with them. Now, throughout the Lake Districts, you've got a huge number of what are referred to sometimes as dry stone dikes or dry stone walls, and tourists and visitors climb over them. And as they climb over them, these aren't walls that are cemented together. You know, it's dry stone, it's just stone that's stacked. And as they climb over them, they destroy them. Now, that can have a lot of impacts. Animals and stuff can escape through broken bits of wall, or even if they just leave gates wide open, animals can escape. And it also means that the farmers, the landowners, have to pay to repair those areas. Now, also, if you've got lots of tourists camping, now obviously in the lakes, the rules are slightly different from what they are in Scotland, in that camping is much more restricted. Wild camping isn't quite as prominent or legal in the Lake District as it is in Scotland. So if they are camping, you have an impact of obviously the tents and the campers themselves, and you know the amount of litter and whatnot that can create, but also you've got potential problems with people in setting fires. And most of the time we're not talking about maliciously setting fires, but if you do happen to have a very dry summer, and if you've got somebody camping in an area of woodland and they set just a campfire, that can potentially get out of hand, and it can potentially be very, very problematic and have a large impact if it were to spread. Now, Lake Windermere, there's a bunch of different people want to use the lake for a bunch of different reasons. So we need to think about what the impact these different land users could have and how they could impact on one another. So first, you know, jet skis cause a huge amount of visual and noise pollution. So that's going to disturb people who are trying to do more relaxing activities. You know, if somebody's out just trying to go for, you know, a very calm sail, then the noise is going to be disruptive. Or if somebody is out fishing, you know, the noise and the movement in the water will scare away the fish. Also, the actual waves that's kicked out by the jet skis and the act of dragging jet skis up and down the banks can cause erosion along the banks, which can be detrimental in the long term. Again, you've got another area of basically footpath erosion, but in a slightly different context. And that, you know, around Lake Windermere, you've got the same paths that are being walked on again and again and again. So we need to think, right, that's going to have an impact. This leads to the soil being washed away, and that then, you know, causes huge issues, because if the soil's all being washed away, it changes the biodiversity that is going to be endemic to the area, and it changes the amount of, well, you're going to remove plant cover, and then you're going to remove animals as well, which can have impacts on, one, the natural habitat that this area is kind of quote unquote meant to have, and it's going to have impacts on visitor numbers, because visitors are potentially not going to want to visit. And the last one we've got here, you know, fuel leaks, boat engines leak. You know, even, you know, unless you've got an extremely well maintained engine, which a lot of boat owners do not have, the engines leak. So that is, you're going to have engine fluids, diesel, whatever, leaking out of the engine, and it's going to pollute the lake itself. It's going to kill fish, it's going to kill plants, it's going to have just an overall negative impact on this area. Now, the Forestry Commission, so you've got huge amounts of the Lake District is utilised for forestry because it's an effective way to make money out of an area that you otherwise wouldn't really be able to make a huge amount of money of. However, the method of planting, in order to make the actual cultivation of the forestry more efficient, tends to be very, very regular geometric shapes. Now, that's something obviously for the people who's going to clear the forestry at the end of the day that is to their benefit, but many people dislike it because it doesn't look natural. So they try to request that they're planted in a more irregular manner. More often than not, the trees that are planted don't live there. You know, they aren't native to the Lake District. I mentioned the risk of fires in forestry earlier on, so that's obviously a problem. The coniferous forest, if you have ever walked through a bit of coniferous woodland, which I would imagine most of you have, you know, at lower level, at the kind of forest floor level, you tend to have nothing else that's living, because the coniferous trees are so good at blocking out light that it stops other things developing in that area. The forestry itself, it makes money for some people, but it doesn't create a huge amount of jobs. And then, you know, it restricts other potential land uses of the area. When you've got the felling actually happening, one, it's loud, so that is kind of detrimental to peace and quiet in the area. And also, after you have an area that's been cleared, people tend to say it leaves a scar on the landscape. It's something that isn't aesthetically pleasing. So again, that can have an impact on visitor numbers. Our last kind of set of issues or problems that we're going to talk about in conflicts is tourists and local people. Now, one of the big issues you get is that if you've got a huge number of tourists coming to an area, businesses are going to start to cater to those tourists because they're a market. Now, that doesn't necessarily help you if you live in the area. So if you've got, your high street or, your village centre becomes full of places that are only designed to sell to tourists, it has an impact on you. You can't get the things that you would otherwise potentially need because you've got, 5 shops that are selling outdoor kit and, tat. But that is the reality for a lot of these places. Now, this is also going to mean that because the area is becoming so popular, house prices are going to increase. Now, you're going to have large numbers of people who buy second homes in the Lake District, and this can be a very, very significant issue. So you've got lots and lots of second homes. This then means that young people particularly can't afford to buy homes, which is very, very problematic. It also means that because they're second homes, you don't have people living in them year round. So local businesses that would otherwise have stayed open year round to support a local population don't. They only stay open during the tourist season. This then obviously means that the overall economy of the villages and small towns becomes very, very dependent on tourism, so they effectively close during the off season when there's no tourists around. And again, the new buildings and development that is designed specifically at tourists, very often they are not in keeping with the natural look of an area. They're not in keeping with what you would expect to see in a small village in the Lake District. Now, I've got this, and I'm going to leave this kind of diagram. I'll also give you copies of it. This is just a nice little bit that gives you an example of different land uses throughout the area and some potential conflicts that could come from them as well. It's just a little bit of it gives you just some more options, some more factors to potentially discuss. Now, I'm going to blitz through some management stuff because most of the management strategies that I'm going to refer to are really straightforward. So if we get stuck into this, right, so walkers leaving gates open, put up signs, forgive the typo, that tell you to close the gates. Or you could install kissing gates, which you've all seen. It's the kind of gates that you walk through, but kind of it'll automatically close behind you. Or you could have spring-loaded gates for the same idea. Dogs or other pets worrying sheep. You get the National Park Rangers who are there to encourage people to be responsible and keep their dogs on leads. Again, you can have fines as well that would be there to discourage people from these kinds of practices. The dry stone dikes being damaged that we talked about earlier, you get organisations, volunteer-led organisations, that purchase areas that are sensitive and they maintain them. If you've got various landowners, the two that kind of jump to mind immediately are farmers and the military, will restrict access to different areas. And again, this is where you have ranger services who liaise with these landowners and try and minimise the potential issues that they would have. The noise that tourists make disturb animals, and it's about encouraging this responsible tourism again. And we look at things like the outdoor access code to try and do that. Now, I'm going to take me away from the bottom. An increase in litter, and this is one that can seem a little bit odd at first glance. You remove bins. If you've got a big litter problem, you remove bins, because the whole point with this is that it encourages people to take their litter home. If you have lots and lots of bins in the area, it means that people are encouraged to just basically pile stuff around them. And that obviously is a big issue. Traffic congestion impedes local people trying to go about their business. You put in one-way systems, for example, in Ambleside, you can only drive around the town in one direction. You pedestrianise areas like they've done in Keswick, and you just generally improve public transport. Now, this is the last bit of this, and I'm going to go through it reasonably quickly because I've got about a minute left. Footpath erosion leading to visual pollution. You put stone paths in, you improve the paths, and you try and encourage people to use different areas. Noise and air pollution, again, public transport, get more people off the roads. All of the different issues that we talked about with second homes, there aren't a huge amount of things that are done to deal with this. Second homes are a major, major issue. You do put in things like there's help to buy schemes, but they are not designed to help with that. They just happen to. And lastly, with Windermere, the big success with dealing with the problems in Windermere was introducing a speed limit. By putting a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit, the National Park Authority basically decided that they valued the more tranquil pursuits over the kind of the needs of, or the wants of people to go power boating and jet skiing in the lake. Now, with that, I'm going to wrap up today, guys, and I will see you guys in class next time. And until then, bye.